Just so you people getting this on tape will feel good and left out, we were just having some Kai roots reread. And one, he mentioned that once you're king, you no longer need ancestors. And I don't normally comment on who the hell writes these. But you do understand, or I want you to, because that is a quite real experience out in the city, that once somebody gets in control, you don't have to worry about ancestors. You don't have to brag. You don't have to say, well, I've got here in my position due to the fact that my father was king so-and-so and all of that. If you took over power yourself, there's nobody in the kingdom going to say, well, yeah, you're in power, but boy, what an upstart. You know, say, I'm talking about a real king. I'm talking about a badass king, somebody's in charge. Nobody questions. Nobody says, where did you come from? Nobody says anything except, yes, sir, Mr. King, yes, sir. That's all they say. And then Kai went ahead and pointed out that, in a sense, the revolutionist was in the same position. That is, his version could read something on the lines of, once you get somewhere, once you get there, it doesn't matter how you got there. And I couldn't resist pointing out a little bit, whatever the hell this is, and for you people on tape and everywhere else, I am getting very close, since I always need a new hobby, I'm getting very close to deciding never to say again what this is, or to call this, or to say it's not this. I'm almost tempted very shortly not to ever talk about what this is, period. Not what it is, not what it not is, and not to remind you that it's not religion or philosophy, because every time I remind you of that, it is religion or philosophy. Anytime I say what it's not. But the revolutionist version could be that once you get somewhere, it doesn't matter how the hell you got there, I believe is what he said. But notice, whatever this is, as long as I'm still using it tonight, the kind of activity throughout history that this would seem to be related to in some way. What do they talk about? What's all the traces left over? What's these big old fat Vademecum books that they call all kinds of things? It's over and over again, up until contemporary times, about that very thing, how we got here, our ancestors. They don't talk about what this is. They don't talk about what I have done. Think about it. Everybody is talking about ancestors. Everybody's talking about the ship. And you can throw them down and search them, and how often are you going to find cargo in somebody's pocket? Much less in their nervous system. They won't talk about the ship. And it seems natural. Everybody wants to talk about the ship. Bon voyage, yes. Can anyone see this? Can you see the human nervous system as a distinct measuring device? And can you see yellow circuit consciousness as its printout? Here I go, the very things I'm threatening to stop. I was going to say, don't take that too lightly. Don't take that as being just a figure of speech. Consider what that could actually be. Now, it's not that it necessarily would actually be in the way in which I described it, because if it could be that way, somebody would have said it before, just by accident if you want it that way. So it's not really any way I can say it. But could you see, in a sense, that human consciousness, life using human consciousness, life, at least on the 3D level of which you can observe now, seems to have selected man among everything else here that you can see, and push the nervous system up to the point that we have the high gray matter and have what is referred to as consciousness. We have molecules that can talk. Molecules that can make noise that apparently is malleable. But can you see consciousness in a certain way, that life using consciousness to do nothing other than make continual measurements? I had not had any real plans how much further to go into this, but imagine that life has this project. I'm just saying this is one possibility. Well, not all of you can laugh along. One time I suggested, they thought it was a joke, I guess, some of them did, that before we put it together, Evotech or anything publicly, I just said sort of as one possibility that you could do, if the time was right and the place was right, was to do the project, the capital T and a capital P, the project, get a piece of land somewhere and put up a fence and a big old nice sign that looks official, the project coming soon. And you build a fence, and it's a circular fence, maybe around an acre. And then you build up a fence, let's say 10 feet high. And then you stick up some kind of structures. It doesn't matter what, just pieces of flashing rolled up, pipes, just a few things that when you drive by or go by, there seems to be something in there. And a lot of dust always coming out. and there is a gate, and there's cars and trucks going in and out. But the only thing that people ever see is every, I don't know what, say month, every several weeks, the fence goes up a little higher. And then some more things come up. It looks like the frame of something, you can't tell exactly what, and maybe a little smokestack. And it just goes on forever. And the sign gets a little bigger, coming soon. Don't be impatient, the project. And all it is, throughout eternity, or as long as we care to do it, it's just the fence keeps going up, higher and higher, and still you hear noises, nobody knows what is going on, and there's dust and cars going in and out. But it's just a fence, the project. What if life has a project? Not necessarily that one, but what if life has a project and it needs some internal reports of smaller level to it, of course, internal measurements? Could you see human consciousness? As I am so big hard to do at times, you can have a couple of seconds to think about it, that everything that goes on, all human institutions, all inventions, technology, the arts, philosophy, can you see, literally, that it would all fit into a form of measurement? Everything. Technology, of course, you might think is the obvious. But so-called philosophical, artistic ideas, social ideas, are all a form of measurement. Religion is a form of measurement to say, do unto others, or God is good. It's all a form of measurement. Can you see that on that basis, that all of human consciousness could be classified as a measuring device for some purpose, not yours, for life's purpose, and then yellow circuit consciousness, speech, and everything that yellow circuit consciousness does for the nervous system is being the kind of, in many cases, or in some cases, a hard form of printout. Not just on paper, but speech. Every time somebody says, I do not like somebody, every time I do not approve of that person doing that, I especially do not approve of any large social movement in that direction. It's a measurement. It is a measurement. And to some degree, there is a possibility there. I'm not going to tell you what I fully understand as to how much of such matters life hears in some conscious way. That's not even what we're interested in now. But in some way, you are making a report. The people who say, I don't like that, I'm sick of this, they are measuring something, and they're making a report. Something I almost touched on when I brought this up last time that I want to go into a little bit. There are things that 3D consciousness, now just consciousness as we know what that is, everything of which you can be conscious has 3 dimensions. No less, and ordinarily no more. People don't even take into consideration time on a continuing basis. But they absolutely have 3 dimensions. If it's your opinion, it has 3 dimensions. If it's an idea, if it's a daydream, if it's a nightmare, it has 3 dimensions, or you could not think it. You could not be conscious of it. Everybody does understand that. I keep getting some looks of people like, well, that's not true. A piece of paper has 2 dimensions. Stuff produces stuff. You can't have 3-dimensional stuff coming from 2-dimensional stuff. 3-dimensional stuff does not put out 2-dimensional stuff or 1-dimensional stuff, ultimately. It can put out a piece of paper, but the piece of paper is a 3-dimensional object. You can say with the typing, the writing on pieces of paper are 2-dimensional. But they're on a piece of paper. There is no such thing in human consciousness in the city. There's nothing that is exempt from having 3 dimensions. If it doesn't have 3 dimensions, it's less than non-existent. Because you can say, well, I don't believe that flying saucers exist. Well, that's 3-dimensional. What, flying saucers? No, your belief. Yeah, well, it can't. Well, a belief doesn't have dimensions. All right, let's do away with you, and let's see what we got left. We got nothing left. If we got you and that's your opinion, the opinion is ultimately, and I'm not trying to play with words, I want you to see, it is three-dimensional. All right. Consciousness, as it is, being three-dimensional, being synonymous with the dimensions of which we're conscious and vice versa. You can turn it around. There are several things I want to point out that three-dimensional consciousness cannot do. I'll start with two very specific. It cannot measure the infinite, and it cannot measure that which is too vague. But here is what this means to human life once you begin to look at it from a revolutionary view, and then what it does for life itself, possibly, I suggest to you. It cannot measure the infinite. You cannot conceive of the infinite. I guess everybody will admit to that. There's no way to conceive of it. So it has to take, if there is such a thing as infinite, like people, for one instance, man is wont to say that the gods, the great forces, the gods, when people believe of figures, entities being outside the system, it's consistent throughout history of saying, well, the gods have infinite mercy, or the gods are capable of infinite love. Or in some cases, back when the Greeks used to eat that funny food, they'd say the gods have the capacity for infinite violence, if not bad odors. Consciousness has to cut it up. It has to cut off the infinite somewhere around the ankles, has to cut it off around the hairline. It has to cut some piece off of it because the infinite is not three-dimensional. Now, some of you might find it interesting is why life would even give the nervous system up in the yellow circuits the idea of an infinite, that it can say, yes, all right, we know what the infinite is. I can even play around with mathematical formulas, but at any rate, even a person not skilled in physics or mathematics can say, all right, the infinite, yeah, I know what it is. I can look in the dictionary. I understand the infinite says something with no beginning and no end. So life has man's yellow circuits. Be able to say that and then turn right around and say, all right, you understand the definition, yeah? Can you do it? And everybody goes, no. That you apparently have some understanding of what the definition is, what the infinite is, and then you can't do it. Tied to this, at least you think that it's just two separate things that I pulled out. It cannot be conscious of that which is too vague. Now these two are tied together and they come out in this manner. That all measurements end up being hard printed, that is, everything gets named. You cannot be conscious, to make a very specific example, you cannot be conscious. Think about it. You cannot be conscious of someone, another person, who is too vague. Now, of course, people, we can say, the material aspect of people are not too vague, unless in some way they're beginning to, melt out of existence and they're about to be sucked into some universal black hole. But what is too vague? You're standing and talking to someone, they say, they're going to send over a new manager to our branch, the guy from Cincinnati. Oh, Giesenslaw, you remember him? Yeah, I've heard of him. Didn't you meet him once at a party? He was here last year, yeah. What kind of guy? He's going to be in charge of the whole, yeah. He's it. We're all going to be working for him. Well, I didn't get much chance to talk to him. What's he like? If it's vague, you cannot be conscious. You cannot measure the other person. Now people, the conversation doesn't necessarily always have to get to a point that they cut off a man somewhere, that they make it more specific, and you can leave a conversation. Let's say the one I started. You say, well, what kind of guy is it? Who are we going to be working for? Shall I be looking for another job? Can I tolerate him? And so this other guy says, well, to tell you the truth, I guess I met him once other time when you weren't here, but I didn't talk to him. I don't know either. And so you can both leave without taking any measurement. But you will both be dissatisfied, assuming you're wired up to have an interest, that the guy's going to be our new supervisor. To take the measure of someone, they cannot be too vague. To be fully conscious, let us say that you wander around later that afternoon on the next coffee break and somebody else comes in. And they say, ah, yeah, I remember him. I know his name. Oh, funny guy. I know some stuff about him. I had a good friend that worked in the Cleveland office for him for 2 years. I'll tell you what kind of guy we're in for. And he begins to describe the man, being a tyrant, being petty-minded, being absolutely conservative in a social, economic, and political degree, to the extent that he's going to drive us all crazy. Then you have taken a measure. He has gone, and there is a connection, as I said, between that which is infinite and that which is too vague. It has got to be pulled into focus. Part of human consciousness, part of the reason is in the game that seems to be human life, seems to be singularly human life, is you've got to take the infinite and you've got to cut it up into specific pieces by cutting it off at one end or the other. You've got to take that which is too vague and you have got to force it into specifics. A person has got to become some kind of guy with characteristics, or you're not fully conscious of him. Now you can say, if you're following even the example I was making up as I went along, that all right, we know this guy named Giesenslaw is coming down to be our manager, but no one knows anything about him. We can't remember what he looks like. You're not really conscious. You can say, well, I've got a piece of data, I've got a name. They say that that is his name, and they say that he will be here next week. But if that's all you've got, you are not truly conscious of this man. Now, the nervous system is wired up in such a way that you can wander off by yourself and apparently begin to construct almost non-existent measurements. It sounds psychological. It is the operations of the molecular nervous system. You could leave that afternoon and stop by and have your regular 1 or 2 martinis after work and begin to stand there, let that alcohol do its great job, and begin to think, why the hell they go to Cleveland? Well, I should have been manager. I know what's going on here. I've been around the business world too long. He's somebody's relative. He's got something on somebody. They just don't like me. And you can begin to measure this man. Now, if we were ordinary people, you could say, well, the person's having some kind of psychological hallucination, alcohol. They are now thinking and feeling from some specious position of being mistreated, which is all right for children, it's all right for barroom talk, but that goes on, it goes on in you. You have been subject to it all your life. You have got to measure a man, and out in the city they could take this description and say, well, you're mismeasuring him. You don't know anything about him. An example you're making up, the guy's just getting drunk and he's a sorehead and he's depressed, and now he's beginning to conjure up pictures of this guy, Giesenslaw, the new manager, and nobody knows anything about him, and now he's just getting mad at somebody he didn't know anything about. That's three-dimensional. Now you're getting a measurement. Now you can be conscious of him. Do that every afternoon between now and next week when he shows up. By the time he walks in, doesn't matter who is. You already go, you measured him. You are conscious of him. Can you see, back to my opening statement, can you see human consciousness? The nervous system of man, let's start at that position again. The nervous system of man literally, materially, physically being a measuring device. It just so happens it's not made by Stanley, but it is a measuring device. Its job is to measure. That's its job. It goes under other names. It goes under names such as opinions, thoughts, theories, random talk. But it is measuring. Under ordinary circumstances, everything you think, everything you say in the city, at that level of consciousness, is a measurement. Now, could any of you see a way in which man could be looked at not as, even as I've been describing it, this partnership. No one has challenged me. I didn't expect it. That wasn't the point. But no one has even written a note because it fits. I simply started using the term partnership, and I pointed out that this was a better description. It was modern, at least Art Deco. It was an improvement. It was more pertinent and germane to our time than ideas of there being a good part of man and an evil part of man. And it was even more precise than the idea of a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And I just kept making examples and talking and pointing out that in Smith and Jones there seems to be two people, that no one seems to be unified, that there seems to be two of everybody. You can say that to you people, you can say that to a random crowd, and people go, yeah. Can you see a way in which there's obvious validity? Humans have been putting up with this description and buying it. Of course, it was humans putting it out, but then other humans, including the person who says it, that there's two of me. There's a good me and there's a bad me. Or there's an exciting, forward-looking, progressive me, and then there's an old conservative, anachronistic, old sore head. Everybody feels that. But can you see a way in which I could describe that there is no two people inside? But more like this. I had a little something made. But more like a talking nervous system with a three-part continuum. Imagine that's the nervous system I used to draw. Imagine that's right up your spine. It's a three-part continuum, and the various sections, of course I separate them, and your nervous system is not separated like that, but the various sections operating at different speeds and operating on the basis of taking different measurements. And carried to a three-dimensional extreme instead of this three-section continuum, a non-stop overlapping spectrum in the nervous system itself. What if we just took the extreme ends with the red and the yellow, and could you see that as being a basis for this apparent duality in man of a conscious and an unconscious mind, a good and a bad part, a progressive part of me, and then a regressive part of me, the part of me that's happy and forward-looking, and the part of me that goes, forget it. If we looked at the continuum at the extreme ends, can any of you see that back in the 3D world, even if I take away the partnership from you, that sure would answer a lot. In everybody's nervous system, not in their brain, not in the fact that I've got a conscious brain or a conscious mind and an unconscious. You got extremes of the nervous system as it is now. That's the extent from one end to the other. And they are literally at the extreme ends of each individual person's nervous system, and it would produce, I suggest to you most strongly, an inescapable feeling of duality. But it's still based upon where I started, that these sections, in this case the two extreme ends, are of different ages genetically to reach the point that they could be described and measured by some other human. They're operating at different tempos. Apparently almost all of you that's shown any reaction to the 24-hour lag that I've discussed in several ways, you realize the validity of that, but that goes on and nobody's just ever noticed it in that particular way. But that these things have their own clock. They have their own tempo is a better word. They vibrate at their own particular speed, and they have their own particular areas in which they are charged to measure. But it being a continuum, the sections cannot tell, especially when it gets to the talking part. Because the talking part, lots of the measurements It has no idea what's going on. Classic example is this part, especially if we're talking about a person, an apparent individual person who seems to be primarily in charge of this kind of measurement. Oh, all right. A more intellectual person hanging around well, let's go to the extreme. A more physical person. And he tries to talk to the person. He finds out the physical person at this end is not even sure who our president is. Got no idea who his congressman is. Doesn't know anything about the recent summit meeting between our president. And this guy goes, my God. It's frightening that I'm surrounded by people like this. It's two different responsibilities, which are two forms of measurements. And this guy down here says something like, well, if this kind of thing happened in life, he could turn to the other guy and say, when's the last time you saw Merle Haggard? You ever see him in person? What's his latest record? No. I bet you, do you even know if they've moved the Grand Ole Opry from the original building in Nashville? The guy up here goes, what? This guy is measuring. He has different responsibilities in life. No example I started to make, I guess all of you could immediately jump to by now, is somebody at this end, down here, and a person's hollering about all the things they don't like and they do like, and how depressed they are, and how mistreated they are. And the person up here goes, is this woman I've taken up with, is she from another planet? You know, what does this mean? And of course down here, that kind of person looks at somebody like that and think, heartless. Heartless. The person's almost psychotic, except they seem so calm, but they're obviously, they do not understand the severity of our situations as humans. An absolute, non-sectional, in reality, continuum of a nervous system, but different sections overlapping are in charge of different measurements. Or if you want to know the way, they would seem to have distinct and separate responsibilities. As far as measurements, this is either somewhere in words too close to the obvious or so far away that we need a time-lapse microscope, whatever that would be. But can you see this? That an ordinary man, that is the ordinary nervous system of anybody, can only measure that which it can see, and vice versa. And by see, I can include other things, that is, apparently, those things of which you can be conscious. See in the light spectrum, hear in the audio spectrum. Everything in the three-dimensional world, everything that has dimensions, that a man sensually, such as he had another choice, of which through his senses he can be conscious. He can only measure those things that he can see or hear or touch. But the trick is, it's vice versa. You didn't find that to be much of a trick, eh? You can only measure that which you can see, all right? Now let's try it. You can only see. You can only be conscious of that which you can measure. Where does that leave you? Not to give you the blues, but let me point out that everything that's ever been measured has already been measured. Everything that's liable to be measured has already been measured. Those things that people believe that they say in this end of the nervous system is in charge of, filled with these talking molecules, it would say, well, there are things that we have yet to see, things that we speculate on. Wrong. Wrong. Well, there are things that we theorize about. Forces, perhaps cosmic entities. The unknown. Wrong. If it's been measured, it's not unknown. That may be the name of it, but it's not unknown. It has been seen, it has been heard, it has been experienced. And people can say, well, I believe in flying saucers. I got to make a crude example. Not enough of you are following this. Surprise. I believe in flying saucers, says he, but I've never seen one. If you can hear, if you could see what's going on, not that life is wrong, not that that person's an idiot, you don't understand that the world is populated between gnats and ferrets and insurance salesmen. There's these people walking around that are these things. They're measuring devices for life, and then those who can talk, those, which is most of the planet now, and can write, they're in charge of making reports. Individuals, except those that are wired up to be, I think they're referred to as weird. Individuals don't know how much life is using your information, since ordinary people are not even aware of the fact that they're in charge of making measurements, what they're doing, and sending it in. But even after you hear about it, an ordinary person doesn't know how much life is making use of your information, and yet you keep sending it in continually. If a person would say what I have just mentioned, that you can only see that which you can measure and vice versa, they would say, well, I truly believe, and I'm not going to argue with you, but I believe in flying saucers, which is a variation of believing in God. Up-to-date version. I believe in flying saucers. Have you ever seen one? No. And that is a perfect example to dispel what you just told me. It's not. If you could see life using man as a measuring device, then all of these inquiries, all of these arguments, even me staying here talking about this until I could almost, not really. It's just I wish more of you would make more effort and I could get paid a little. And more of you would go, it's just a foolish hope on my part. Of course, I may not have to wish much longer. I hear that they're going to send down geese and slaw to replace me. If you could see that all such notions, go back, that someone says, all right, I believe in flying saucers, I do, and I'm not going to argue with you, but I've never seen one. I'll admit that to you. At least I'm truthful. But I believe in them. And then another person, if not that person, could say, all right, now there is absolute valid denial of what I had just said. That is, people can measure things that they can't see. And you don't understand. Just because a person moves molecules in the air, they've already moved life, moved it up here, and then they went, and they moved it in the air, and it said, I have never seen a flying saucer, but I believe in them, therefore your theory is wrong. You don't understand what's going on. The idea of flying saucers, the idea of whether this guy or gal saw one, or whether they believe in it without having seen one, or whether they've seen one and don't believe in it, whether they've seen them and believe in it, whether they haven't seen them and don't believe in it. That's not the point. And it doesn't belie anything to say, well, I believe in flying saucers. I believe in the gods, but I've never seen it, but I believe in it. And therefore your theory is wrong. We can measure things we can't see. There's no such thing as not seeing flying saucers. It's a measurement. Well, there's no more such thing as not seeing flying saucers than there is in seeing flying saucers. There's no more to, well, I believe in blank, 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 than there is in I don't believe in blank, 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 blank. It is that consciousness finds itself ordinarily in the position that all of this has got to be serious business, or else why are they going to take my life for it? This is serious business, and so there is some significance. I just feel it so. There's some significance in actually seeing something and believing in it, the gods, flying saucers, and not. And we can think, we can see, we can imagine things that I'm sure are real, such as the gods or flying saucers, even without seeing them, and therefore your idea is just useless. That's not what it's about. It's got nothing to do with that. But it seems to. Indeed, life in the city, if this was possible, I'm playing with reality, it would be bedlam. Without the walls, without the beds, not without the limbs. It would be bedlam if everybody had this kind of awareness. Right now, if suddenly I could make you have it, most of you wouldn't be prepared. If suddenly what little some of you may have thought you caught there in the last 2 or 3 minutes of saying that the idea of I believe in this or that, flying saucers, gods, cucumbers, love, compassion, charity, refried beans, reupholstered chairs, steel-belted tires, that all of that is beside the point. All of that is reports going on. And the idea that, well, I personally, I'm talking about I personally, which is, supreme importance. I personally believe in so-and-so. I personally feel so-and-so. You're sending a report to the home office. They may or may not use it. They may or may not even hear it consciously. But they're going to keep you busy. They're going to keep you busy if you want to know I don't give any of you the blues, really. The whole idea of make-do work, busy work. At the very least, you've got to consider the possibility, for instance, you're sitting around by yourself, in your underwear with 3-year-old socks on, watching TV, and it suddenly comes on that the Lakers lost the tourney, and you internally do a bunch of things just for a few seconds about, those smart-aleck Pistons, you're bad-mouthing the owner of the team that wouldn't spend the money. Now, you've got to be you got to have more than your share of goofy dust in your hairdo. Especially if you think for a second that many people sitting on their potato couches all over the country were saying the same thing. So if life needed a report, if it needed a measurement that, hey, the Lakers wouldn't have lost if owner so-and-so had gotten off his checkbook and gotten so-and-so here on the team. Now, life may have needed that measurement, but I'm just saying you've got to, surely, understand that you, within a time frame probably there of a minute, nationwide, were in company of how many other reports of other guys in their underwear going, hey. But it would be a form of bedlam that the nervous system would not be the high end of the nervous system. The only side of the nervous system, really, or the source of the information that you're headed for the slaughterhouse. If that side could be proven, if I could shock it, if I could trick it into seeing that all of what appears to be the substance of conversation and reports, that's not the point. Especially when I believe in so-and-so and I hadn't seen it, so your theory is wrong. No, it's not. Well, I don't really believe in so-and-so. A lot of people believe in God and I'm an atheist. So what? So what? You might as well be talking about flying saucers. You might as well be saying, I personally, I guess it's because of my cultural background, but I personally don't believe in zippers. I don't think they exist. It's the same thing. Same thing. In a quite real way. But you do understand that if this is as valid as I am pushing the words to indicate it is, and I could suddenly make you or somebody else understand that, it would not necessarily be all that comforting just right off the bat. You might find yourself disquieted for a wee bit. Your nervous system it might certainly turn into an accordion, and you think, well, I believe I'll go back to the city for a while until things calm down. In the city, for the general purposes that humanity is serving, one of them I keep indicating, and I'm close enough to hinting, the information, the measurements, this system is more than adequate. All right, it's adequate. I shouldn't be dramatic. It's adequate in the city. But you do suspect that it's not adequate for this. If it was, you wouldn't be fooling around with me. They'd just be in the library. They'd be in the book. You'd ask your mother, your rabbi, a priest, a man selling aluminum siding. And they'd say, sure, little boy, little girl, what else do you want to know, and I'll tell you. What are grown-ups for? Anything can be measured in the city. Anything that is already there and been measured is not adequate for this. You just got to face it. But that does not mean that it's in this kind of ideas of metaphysics or New Age. That is, all right, this kind of information has got to have something to do with flying saucers and planets and spirits. Wrong, 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 wrong. I just told you about that. There's no such thing as believing this has to do with that. There's no such thing as not believing it has anything to do with that. That's already been measured in the city. It's not that this doesn't have anything to do with religion. It's that this does not have anything to do with religion. Either way you want it. It doesn't matter if anybody understood this, and if I was foolish enough to play the game and somebody said, this kind of stuff, I keep hearing that you're talking to some people, and anyway, what are you up to? Is it? I say, well, what do you want to know? And they say, is it about religion? And I say, yes. And they say, well, I heard a tape you made, and I don't think it is. And I say, you're right, it's not. And they can say, well, you said it is. And I say, all right, it is. We haven't you said it's not, and it's not. And that's not being funny. Of course, I wouldn't do that, and it wouldn't serve any purpose. But that is what it amounts to. But you don't have to listen to me. Listen to you. Anything you have ever heard, anything you've ever read, that's immediately comprehensible. Forget whether you say you agree with it. What's the four-dimensional synonym for useless? It don't make a damn whether you believe in it. If you heard about it, if some information you've heard about, I don't care what it is, that you read a book that seemed to have an effect on you that says the future of humanity or the idea of gods actually came about from flying saucers from another part of the universe that landed here. And you can say, I believe that. And I bet you're one of them. I bet you've been in contact. You know, even if that were true, if there's some validity somewhere, for you to use information that's already been measured and put in those words and you to ask me that, the answer is no. And if you don't like that, the answer is yes. If you can ask it, it's a waste of time. Because all you're doing, you're not asking a question. It's the same thing as saying, well, I read this book and I do believe in such and such. So what? You got to ask yourself, to what avail? Well, used to I didn't believe in flying saucers, but now I do. Don't you feel a lot better? Aren't you a lot better off? Yeah. Used to I was an atheist, and now I've gone back to Mother Church. And now you're satisfied, right? If you are, you don't belong here. Or I grew up in a strict blank religion house, and it just ruined me psychologically. But finally, I got shut of that. And of course, my question, if it was really between you and between me and a would-be revolutionist, the question is, so what? And if you had the capacity to actually be a would-be revolutionist, your answer would immediately be, right. There is no so what. Or if you want another way, it is so what. It doesn't matter. How about in our continuing quest for ever-increasing, dense, and revealing definitions, possible definitions of my word neuralize? Along these lines, how about yet another possibility? What's this, number 6, 5? You could look upon neuralize, that activity that many of you have had experience with, hit and run, at least you've run into it or been run over by it, that apparently this can operate in a way that is not every day. That you can apparently think, consider, ponder things without remembering them. Or you can remember things that might be of some interest, and you can do it without thinking about them. How about this one? And I do it tonight because I'm doing it tonight. A personal confrontation with certain data without acceptance of present measurements. That would be neuralizing, brought in line with what my new fences and minefields. It would be a confrontation with certain data. By certain, I mean just any. I'm not limiting it. It would be a confrontation with this data, but without any acceptance, without any consideration of its present measurements. Now somebody can say, well, whose present measurement? Yours, to start with, because you got present measurements, or you couldn't confront it. You couldn't think of it. It's measured somewhere. It's either measured as information worth thinking about, not worth thinking about, information I'd forgotten, I'm glad you reminded me, information I thought about before and it made my head hurt, the hell with it. Whatever it is, it has present measurements. It also, where that seems to be of any importance right then to you, it also has external measurements. That is, you judge as you're supposed to, that is, measure, how your measurement of it measures up against external measurements, such as, I believe in flying saucers, but I've learned not to say that just in general audiences, because some people, believe it or not, I forgot how to look askew, but they'll do it to you. And so I don't do that. So you have a knowledge of other measurements, present measurements, and in general, you can't count on the majority of people you say it to support you in your belief. But you know you believe it. Neuralizing, possible definition number, whatever. A confrontation with certain data, any data, but without an acceptance, without a consideration of its present measurement. That would be the reality behind my made-up word of neuralize. Now, I don't care if you don't think that's a great improvement. It is. It's a great improvement if you've expanded anywhere from the last time I gave you a possible definition of it. That's up to you. Although I will admit, Greyhound buses can slide sideways. And I will admit, some people have been known to even stow away on the trailways. But in general, those who do not pay their way don't go nowhere. So I don't know. We'll leave it to you as to where you have gone since the last time I gave you a definition. But this is tied exactly to what I'm talking about measurements. It would be you being able to truly, with the full operation of your nervous system, as much as we can possibly talk about it, of being able to think about things, but not limited to, outside of their present measurements. And to start with yours, forget, it's not a matter of whether I got good measurements, bad measurements, that is whether my opinions of flying saucers are good or bad. Right. Well, does that matter? Uh-huh, yeah. I didn't think it did. No, it doesn't. Okay. That doesn't matter. But it's be able to think of something, ponder something, consider something, to study it in a revolutionary manner, but to do it without the hold of its present measurement. And anything that you can think of is going to arise from the nervous system, is going to arise below. The level of consciousness in you is going to rise below the level of all of humanity's DNA development, genetic development. That's where it's going to come from, the same pool as everyone else's knowledge, our same one or two ancestors, if you want to look at it that way, the same genetic pool. And you can be conscious of the information, of what it is you're thinking about, the data. But to do so and then absolutely ignore, it's an unnatural, willful, impossible act, to ignore, to not accept the present measurement. That is, what I think about this ain't right. That's going in. That's like turning on the computer before it even goes. That is always it. Whatever it is I think, whatever comes on the screen, that I like it, I dislike it. That's got nothing to do with it. Whatever I think about it is wrong. That's just a given. And it doesn't matter what you think about it. You can change your opinion tomorrow and it's still wrong. You can confront it without any acceptance of its present measurement. It's a hard thing to do. I know a lot of you people, especially in the colder climes, like specific examples. You know, have you ever tried to take toothpaste when it's out of the tube have you ever tried to do it with somebody else's sex organs? I'm just trying to give you some indication, because I admit this is not just something you pick up and do tomorrow. Have you ever tried riding cross country on a Greyhound next to a man with a small brown paper bag? Or have you ever been that man with a small paper bag trying to cross the universe in a Greyhound? How about some quick hit and run, some things I wanted to unfold little pieces at a time from the last few weeks, since my part of the tape is my part of the tape. One is I need to make a correction from the last time when I said that a real revolutionist quite seriously has no business wrestling gnats. And I pointed out that even if you win, it's still disgraceful. And I said that I had read from sources, from measurements that I didn't question, that at any given time the gnat population was 60% of humanity. I'd like to correct that because I thought after we left that evening that what I read was, and I like this better, of course I made up the whole thing, but I wanted to, that what I read, I had it wrong, was at any given time the gnat population was 60% above. You follow? So for every human at any given time you've got at least 6 gnats extra. So I want you to understand that it was not anywhere close to you outnumbering the gnats. I had the figure wrong, and I always like to keep things on as strictly a statistical scientific basis as possible. Another little thing, I've had several people ask questions like this, and something jogged my attention recently, is periodically somebody will get involved with this a little bit, and somebody wrote a note a while back that said that they had thought they had observed somebody they knew out in ordinary life that seemed to be handling some of the methods I used. The one that I've talked about, and one of the ones, the example they used was apparently somebody that just kept sticking their foot in the shit of their life over and over and over, and then seemed just to be, or even claimed to be, well, I just deal with one day at a time, and I don't worry about what I did in the past. In other words, they don't seem to remember things, they don't seem to learn, and they just say, well, I just take it as it comes. And then they pointed out that, they didn't seem that this person that they thought that they knew didn't seem to be, shall we say, deriving any great benefit from this. All right, you follow from that example. A lot of you have had that feeling, and I used to spend some time when you were people pointing out, listen, anything I can describe, such as me saying in all these various ways and through Kairoot about ordinary memory is a waste of time, and it's partially on the plate of life. And the real revolutionist, in a sense, has no past. It's not some flamboyant attempt to be heroic verbally for me to say that he has no past, but he doesn't. He cannot operate on that basis. All right. That is a fact. I have said that. There are people out in life, anything I can describe, anything I can tell you, my non-existent code of conduct, to say a revolutionist should do so-and-so or should not do so-and-so. Everything that I can put into words, somebody has done it. You can look around and believe that you're measuring somebody, and hey, they're doing that, or they're refraining from doing that very thing. So what? If they're not involved with this, if their intent is not to do this, whatever the intent is, then it doesn't matter. They can use any method. They can do anything they want to, and they are going to do it. Somebody's going to do it. Somebody's going to be doing the very things I've said. If your aim is only to be ordinary, you're probably going to succeed. If you do not have an aim, as vague as it may still seem, to say the least to many of you, that this has an aim, it does, you at least know that you're attempting to do something that the aim is so vague that it is extraordinary, or else I have some way dragged you into my own psychosis, or we're all now into some mass hallucination together. But other than that possibility, then even if you can't see what the aim is, if it could even be described, if you can't see what it is now, you do understand, well, I'm involved with something extraordinary just on the basis that I can't see the aim. And anything else seems to have a name. I'm on a diet because of a name. I'm going to school at night on the side because of a name I have. And this, if you need any other proof, since it's, even if you don't sense the aim, if you do sense the aim, if you know what the aim is, then you know how extraordinary this is. If you don't sense the aim, you just can't get any fix on it, do you see how extraordinary this is? What else in life would you or anybody do that you can't get any fix on, if you're in the latter category, of what the purpose of this is? Now, that's extraordinary enough. If you're not involved with this, then you could take any method I described, me or anybody else that understood anything, and it's not going to have any purpose. If you do not have some extraordinary aim, you can do anything I say. If I say, well, here's an excursion to do, or here's an absolute rule that you'll just do this. I'm telling you, all of you should do this. If I say, you've got to do this, or I'm not even going to fool with you. It is not some worldwide axiom that would help anybody else. It won't change anything for anybody else. And And another little something. You people that's involved together, sexual partners in there. So let me point out again, from a slightly little, perhaps different verbal angle. Any of you involved in this and then involved together, you simply cannot, and it's almost inevitable that it'll happen if you don't put forth effort, but you cannot let it become a relationship of you two beating up on each other. Not physical. I wouldn't allow that if I knew any of you did that. That'd be the end of you as far as I'm concerned anyway. But that you end up beating up on each other. You don't ever have to lay a hand. You know what it is. And that is the course of nervous systems being run together. But there's another aspect. It don't also fall into what is almost an apparent binary extreme of that. A feeling like in some way that your relationship has got to turn into some kind of bland, innocuous oatmeal. That in some way you've got to become uncomfortable twins. Even one of you may believe that, well, hey, I know what you mean by beating up on each other, and relationships always get kind of tense, and people begin to pick on each other. But me and my little girl, me and my little guy, we work at it, we're going to be just like that. Nobody's just like that. You're not even just like that. You're not... You know, in that great cigar factory of life in the city, you're not even that tightly wound yourself. Because that's part of the dynamics that life uses on people, is to believe, this is just one of the obvious things once you begin to see it, that you can take two, for instance, you can take two rotted apples and put them together and have one fresh one. You can have two people that are loosely wound, but if you put them together and jam them all up, hey, you got one great person. You got to think about it. That's like, well, I got one car at home that won't run in the garage, but if I had another one, I got room for another one. If I can park them both in the garage, hey, then I'm in business. That is, having two examples of the square root of two. What are you going to do with them? Well, but now I got two. Well, all right, now you got two. Not only you cannot beat up on each other, and it's just, none of you should waste your time having any kind of mechanical, that is automatic regrets and guilt. You just got to be forewarned. If you could learn from your past, you'd already know this, but I'm taking you point blank. No matter what kind of lust, no matter what kind of love, no matter how you seem to be friends and just made for each other, and even under the light of you both involved with this, so it must have even a supernatural predisposition, at least, for you two to be together. Give it a month, 6 months, a year, and you're going to be beating up on each other. Families do it. Children and parents, parents and children, uncles and aunts, everybody. That is the nature of life. But you've got to be, I'm just pointing out, you have got to be aware that that happens, and don't let it happen. Walk away from it if nothing else. But, on the contrary, as I said, you are not destined, especially if any of you think because of this, you're not destined in some way to become faceless, bland, tasteless, mixture of oatmeal, putting you two together, and yeah, we don't beat up on each other, we make it a point, we don't do all that, and we just kind of become like, I guess, Grant Wood's good old American Gothic painting. They've taken me and the little woman and they just squished us all together, and now we're just like, I don't know, the cake that was left out in the rain, I guess. We don't beat up on each other, but you know what we got. You cannot turn into an uncomfortable combination of twins and you suddenly become one great person. And if not suddenly, to believe, well, I'm doing this and the gods and the cosmic forces will smile upon me. You know, who knows, maybe they will. I would not count on it. You got to be aware you have got to take some responsibility, and you got to see that relationships can be measured. And you're prone to beat up on each other. You're prone to beat up on your brother, your sister, your mother. As that great philosopher Sinatra said, that's life. Don't do that, but do not, on the contrary, expect that you should or will in some way cosmically, new agely, spiritually, thisly, merge in you and this other great person that makes you so horny sometimes that they'll finally come to their senses and you'll both kind of just melt together into this glob. We got to turn the tape over just a second. One other thing, I've had so many comments and notes from you people, even out of town, about the 24-hour lag I pointed out. That every now and then I do get a little payment when I predict I will to myself. That's all I do. That is, predict. But if any of you are still having any problem with that, or the reality of it, or some of you, there's a couple of other examples, let me point out one that everyone's aware of that may help some of you get a better hold, and some of you that already see it, that anyway, you may like this. It's one I bypass, but it is known, this reality of this is known by everybody, your mothers, your grandmothers, everybody. At times, and let me pick it, I guess, the best example in the city, death. Your mother dies, your father dies, your lover dies. You're notified. Suddenly you get a phone call. Somebody says, sit down, I got to tell you some bad news, and somebody's died. Somebody close to your genetic tree, let us say. It's not part of your love life. This is known in the city that it normally takes about a day, and they use such terms as this. They'll tell a person, I got to tell you something, your father was just killed in a car wreck. And a little later, you've surely been around this example. I'm not going to ask you to try to think back when if you were in it, but you've been around it with somebody else, and people leave the room, they say, how's he taking her? How's she doing? Well, I stood there and talked to her, and she kind of looked blank, and I held her hand. We talked a while, and I said, you understand? She said, yeah. But tell you the truth, she's in shock. They don't always say psychological, but they mean psychological shock as opposed to a physical trauma. And it's true. And the person will walk around, and you can go in, and say it was her father, and that they were just like that. And pretty soon she'll come out of the room after a few minutes. She'll say, well, and everybody knows she's kind of acting spooky. But she'll start acting like, well, everything's all right. Well, let's fix something to eat. Aren't you people hungry? And at first people are prone to say, well, look, honey, you take it easy. You don't have to do that. We're not hungry at a time like this. And it's like the person just begins to sort of wander around, sort of in shock. But they'll start doing things, well, let's clean up the house. So let me fix you people something to eat. And those around will sort of agree that she's really in shock. The full impact of what's happened hasn't hit her. Think about it. That's the kind of words. I didn't make up that term. The full impact hasn't hit her. The reality of the situation, give me my pipe, has hit her. Somebody told her, they said, your father was killed in an automobile accident. He was on his way, he was on the freeway outside of Dallas, and evidently a tractor trailer is all we heard, is just run into him. It all goes in. The person looks and they said, you do understand, are you all right? And they'll talk to people and comfort them and say, you understand, I mean, there's no doubt. They tried to get him to the hospital, but we found out, do you want to hear all this? And the person said, yeah. He was so badly mangled, he was actually dead before they got there. They went ahead and took him to Dallas General to let a physician had to pronounce him dead. But he was just dead. If that makes you feel any better, he was obviously just, well, he was dead instantly. The information's in there, and they say, do you understand? They say, yeah. But then they'll say, well, she's still sort of in shock because the full impact has not hit her. Now think about it a second. The full information's there. She may ask, are you sure? And they got a telegram, or they call the hospital again. The full information, it is measured, your father is dead. There is no doubt. She gets it from 8 or 10 sources there. She accepts the final measurement, my father is dead. And yet this very common description is the full impact of this tragedy has not hit the dear girl. And sure enough, what'll it take? She may stay up all night. She may finally get so tired of cooking cookies or cleaning the house or talking to everybody, she may lay down on the sofa and snooze for an hour, and then she'll get up. And we start getting into the next 24-hour period somewhere, and then they'll say it's beginning to hit her. But she knew it. In a sense, the full ramification, that is the full measurement, your father is dead, is there. There's no doubt. But that description, surely all of you have heard it. If you hadn't heard it in person, I've heard it in movies, that they'll say about somebody. And it doesn't just even have to be death. Somebody comes home and their wife or husband's gone, there's a note. saying, I've had it, I'm gone. And they look around, and sure enough, everything's gone. The car's gone. And they ask neighbors, have you seen anything? Well, yeah, your wife, I saw her pack up and the kids. I thought you were going on vacation. She left about 11 this morning, right after you left for work. And the man walks, and he begins to call people. Do you know anything about my wife? What's happened? And it didn't have to be death, or maybe some of his buddies come over, the neighbors come over and say, I hate to be nosy, but is something wrong? And the guy's going, well, my wife, did she say anything to you? I just came home, and I don't know what's going wrong. Maybe the neighbor, the wife will go back next door. She'll say, I believe his wife left him. In fact, I think maybe you should go over there and have a drink with him or do something. He's acting weird. I don't think the full impact of what's happened is hitting, because I believe she's gone. Or maybe she says, I know she's gone. She told me. But somebody would go over there, and the guy's just kind of wandering around. The full impact hadn't hit him. He can have the information. I just use again, I want you to see that this is a distinct reality. It is not measured in life in this way, and it has a continuing impact on the way that humans act. They're making measurements that oftentimes, well, as in the city all the time, the measurements apparently have some particular validity and importance to the individual, which is part of, how life keeps you in this little measuring pack with the name Stanley, and it pulls you out, and it keeps getting reports, and sometimes it just evidently stands there and plays with the tape. And you keep reporting. Every time it pulls the tape out, there's some carpenters, they know what they're doing, they try to use it as a yo-yo, and you keep going, yes, hello. But much of that measurement, much of what would seem to be unanswerable questions, continuing, unsatisfying relations between people, miscommunication, you can see it right in that time lag, in the individual and in the way it manifests itself, since it's going on in everybody else, that people, and I refer you one more time, if you can tie this in tonight, some of you have heard me talk before, and you've actually heard a piece of it, that what would seem to be the kind of different general functions, the different areas within the human nervous system operate at different speeds, have different agendas, have different purposes. The time lag is a reality, and much of what seems to be, as I started to say, a kind of lack of communication, of irritation between people. You can see it laying right in that area, that everybody is suffering from it, unbeknownst, subject to it individually. And then the crosstalk, the cross information apparently going on. You have the makings of, I guess it would be the Tower of Babel number 13. And what I didn't get into tonight, and if I just go ahead and say the sentence, maybe you'll be lucky and I'll never get into it. My closing comment. What if, at one time I started to do this and to speak on it like all night, use a month or so until further notice, speak to infinity on this general, based on this general amount. Or I'll just go ahead and put it in one sentence, and maybe that's the last you'll ever hear of it. That's the way it goes. What if life and man, what if it all is exactly as ordinary people believe it is? I said one sentence, but you understand that all of this, me, all these other guys in history, that all this stuff about this isn't all there is, that there's this other area, and they keep misinterpreting the information. I'm here to give you new information, extended information, into another dimension. What if, regardless of all that enhancing, what if what ordinary people have always believed, what they right now believe in the city, about man and life, what is that is exactly the way things are? Well, since I said that, let me give you an excursion. Between now and the next time we meet, the next time you see a tape, that's one of the benefits, if in case nobody's noticed it, a side benefit of meeting now every other night, is I can run all the excursions, and you've only got, 48 hours to do them, unless I say you got a month and all that. But from now on, just consider you got until next time you see a tape or we meet. I want everybody to get out in your whatever place you found and take a nice 50-minute leisurely stroll, not run, just a walk. And I want you to neuralize, what if life and man, the nature of man, everything I've ever attacked, poked fun at, tried to trick you into looking at another way that I said was incomplete information, all that. What if life, complete life, and man is exactly as ordinary people believe it is? And to give the printout something to do, I would like for everybody to fill in this blank. If you like it, send it to me. Three-fourths of my life is made up of blank. For those of you who don't know, that used to be known as bombs away. For me to let you help out in this great excursion, the stuff I don't know that you can fill in.